And so today we have Lennart with us. Lennart is a super cool dude doing super cool stuff. I won't say any more than that because I think you're just gonna blow it out of the water anyway. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Leonard. I usually join as a guest, so I'm very familiar with the format. I love that it's on Fridays. This is like my comfort Zoom because it's always end of the week. There's only one more afternoon in front of us. That's always my sign, and I feel bad when I miss it because I feel like now I missed something at the end of the week. Yeah, my background, my background is software development. I only kind of accidentally got into the infosec side over the years. Um, I started a new company, which also happens to be an open source project in 2023. Pretty much the first day of 2023 was my official start with that. That project is called Nzyme, Nzyme. You can get that on GitHub. You can check out the website if you want. And that the use case of it and the description of it has really kind of changed over the years. It started as a Wi-Fi IDS in 2017, 2018, kind of, and was very, very basic because it was a side project of mine. So all the fun things like multi-tenancy and a proper login and things like that, I didn't build that. I only focused on the fun features. And it was basically trying to secure your Wi-Fi networks by putting a bunch of Wi-Fi cards into a monitor mode, which allows you to pick up all the Wi-Fi frames that are in the air around you all the time and then looking at anomalies. So building a Wi-Fi intrusion detection system. Some people might know Kismet out there, which is a fantastic project, but what I built has mostly focused on the defensive side of things, and not so much on the war driving and the maybe slightly more offensive side as well. So coming into that from the defensive side, then started this company behind it and found the time and the resources to build this out in a proper way, I would say. And then the use cases kind of shifted, and now it's much more than just a project only for Wi-Fi. It's what I call close access denial, which in very short is the idea that if you are a target important enough to someone where their classic means of exploitation, like phishing, right? For example, and all the other remote ways of how you can get to someone. If those fail, if you are a target that is important enough, they may decide to show up in person. There are documented cases of that. It's a little hard to get information about that because it often goes into intelligence operations or into things that were simply never properly disclosed or detected, or were detected too late and there was simply no story to it except that somebody found an implant somewhere in a network, a physical implant, or figured out that the initial vector was Wi-Fi. But if you don't have something that monitors for that, it's very hard to build a story around that of what actually happened, right? You kind of start in the middle of the story already. And so this leaves me with this very, very interesting combination that is in the widest sense, I think, cyberphysical, as in looking at the physical protection of your data and your networks from a radio frequency perspective, but also a classic physical intrusion detection, like cameras, entry sensors, things like that. All of that is part of having a very, very wide and holistic view of protecting your data and your critical systems, or even, and there's different ways of what this can mean to different people, maybe even protecting people against malicious actors or threat actors. There can be surveillance in there. There's a whole lot of stuff when you think about, man, I'm blasting out all these radio frequency emissions all the time. Is there maybe something interesting to people around where I am, where I go, who else is with me, things like that. So that's the pitch that I'm still working on. I'm not trying to pitch anyone today because I think we want to talk about the tech, but I'm still kind of working on how to explain this in simple terms because I think it's something that's not very common because it's a very niche thing to do, I believe. Absolutely.
So that's exactly kind of like my thought, and my first question really is so this sounds like a bag of super cool stuff that I want you to get into. But like right on the onset, my thought is, well, yes, I know at the intelligence level, like yes, of course, this stuff happens. Um, I have the hunch that like, hey, this is probably happening at other levels. But I don't think unless you actually work in that or kind of like do that day to day, you would actually be aware of those things. Now that you've done this for a couple of years, I'm sure you've had discussions with people. You kind of said like, hey, most of the time, it's not aware. But is it a thing? Do you have a good handle on? Obviously, probably you probably don't want to go into specifics because that stuff is pretty sensitive. But like, have you identified like, oh no, it is a thing, and it tends to be a thing for like these types of people. So essentially, if somebody's listening and is in some industry maybe or something, they can kind of go like, oh yeah, okay, maybe this is kind of related to, I might be a target.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you're asking that because I'm always very, very careful with trying not to scare people into into deploying this because I scared them into it, right? I That's why I'm saying this is niche. This is something that you will get conversations very quickly with people who say, "Oh, can you build a mobile version of this that I can take with me so I can use the coffee shop Wi-Fi?" And I would say you can use the coffee shop Wi-Fi. You'll be fine. You probably don't need that. With the caveat of a lot of people don't need it and still find interest in the topic and run it. Right? It's completely cool to run this because it's cool stuff and there are antennas involved. That is absolutely cool. But should you spend a ton of money on this if you are unlikely to be targeted by this because you're much more likely to be phished, for example, that is still a much easier way to get into your email inbox, right, or into your local information. Um, so that I just want to get that out of the way first. There's a lot of people who will not need this and will never need this. And I am happily using the DEF CON Wi-Fi and the Las Vegas hotel Wi-Fi. This is all fine with certain general cyber hygiene in place, obviously. But places where this does get interesting. In general, I would say critical infrastructure is very sensitive to this. Industrial IoT. I live in Houston. There are a lot of oil and gas locations, refineries, offshore locations where the pipelines come ashore. All of these situations are important enough and often wireless as well. That these companies definitely have a use case for that, and they are already spending money on this. It just happens to be extremely expensive. There's corporate espionage. If a large company with powerful competitors has a board meeting, for example, they are already getting bug sweeps done, right? They're already doing like military level uh, uh, technical surveillance countermeasures is what it's called technically, but they're already getting bug sweeps done. They're already setting up monitoring for the Wi-Fi of their satellite internet that they will be using if they have a meeting abroad, so they don't have to use local infrastructure for that. There are those things. There is also a level of personal protection for certain people. This could be very high profile dissidents, for example, political activists, people with a political history that are in exile now. This can be very rich individuals who might be at risk for certain things. They are often coming in more from a surveillance angle. And less from a somebody's going to come and plug something into my Wi-Fi router in the closet, right? Or try to plug something into my laptop in my home office or my family office, something like that. And then of course there's the everything is government, military. They of course have these requirements wherever they are in the world, and also certain NGOs. I think one of the best documented cases was Russian military intelligence was using actually a Wi-Fi pineapple and a bunch of off-the-shelf tools in a rental car that they parked on the parking lot of the OPCW, which is the Organization for the Prevention, I think, of Chemical Weapons, where they were in that lab in The Hague in the Netherlands. They were researching and analyzing samples from Syria where chemical weapons were used. That, of course, the Russians said they had nothing to do with, and basically sent a intelligence team there to break into the Wi-Fi of that building. And they were actually busted by Dutch military intelligence, the Americans of Europe, as I like to call them. They actually busted them and sent them right back home with their diplomatic passports, which is a very cool. If you want to look that up, it's a really cool story. They have photos of their equipment in the trunk and things like that. And Wi-Fi is only one vector, but it's a very popular vector for sure. So it's pretty broad, but again, there's a lot of environments that simply don't need this, and that's fine. That's cool.
Very cool, very cool. So I don't know if you had already like in your mind like here's what I'd like to talk about. I'm also happy to just kind of probe into some of the more interesting stuff you've been up to like lately as part of that product because it sounds like it's pretty multifaceted.
Yeah, I mean, I think one important thing for me was to kind of point out who needs this and who doesn't need this. In fact, the website talks about who doesn't need this, because again, I don't want to get into the business of scaring people. Uh, I, I think the other thing I touched on a little bit, which is the different the different perspectives on the use case or the different types of use cases on like broader categories where the one is a classic infosec approach of like I don't want to have a anything plugged into my Ethernet jacks, for example, somewhere in a public area. Even if that might be isolated pretty well, this can be a great initial vector to move forward from there, because you're going to eventually hit some sort of a router or some sort of a network appliance, and we all know how safe and secure those are, right? Um, and you can there's I think a lot of red team engagements who like to talk about these things because again they're cool, where you can use as an initial vector this physical intrusion, drop something, and you're on the network and then move from there because it's unlikely to be monitored pretty well. So this actually the software actually has a pretty large Ethernet part to it with asset detection and alerting you on new things that are happening, DHCP, ARP, like all of that, which is a fun thing to build because I don't care what's on the internet, like at all. I don't. The moment this comes from the internet, I don't care. It's only about what's happening in the network, which is a very relaxing thing to do, actually. So that is one, and then the other thing is the broader surveillance, I think, of not actually trying to get into a network, but maybe using certain radio frequency emissions just to know who is in, for example, a target building, right? Your car, for example, is constantly emitting tire pressure sensor data that happens to have IDs. So I can tell you if your car, if I'm close enough, there's ways, if a certain car is currently parked at a certain location. You can profile and fingerprint wireless devices based on the Wi-Fi networks that these devices are asking for. I can, well, I don't want to, but I could tell you, for example, if you are likely a United, Delta, or American customer based on the lounge networks that your phone is asking for, right? You can really, if you take enough time, you can really start to fingerprint people. And you can use, I think one of my favorite stories is there's a fairly large European police department. I want to say something federal even. Um, they have issues with their officers and their agents using phones and logging into the police station's Wi-Fi. The problem is that now that phone's going to ask for that Wi-Fi wherever it is, and that is something that organized crime will pick up on because you're basically starting to broadcast that you have been successfully logged into a police station Wi-Fi in the past. And now, if you're unlucky, you also use that for your private network at home, which now you can tell that there's a device that has been logged into a police network and into clearly a private network, and then maybe into your kids' school's network or whatever, right? You can really start to build pretty bad information out of all of that. And so you can set up things to monitor for like, hey, I need to make absolutely sure that this is never broadcasted because this is a policy that people delete that network again from their phone after they have connected. So you can use this for this kind of policy enforcement as well and alert if there is an officer's phone who's broadcasting these things. So there's so many different things that you can do with it. I had a user who came in and said like, hey, can I alert on a certain prefix of a MAC address? It's like, not yet, but you totally should, right? Not really understanding like what exactly, but it's easy to build. And I was like, there's probably a use case. And then he sent me one, or they sent me one, and I looked it up, and that was the OUI, so the MAC prefix for Taser Inc., which it turns out tasers have Bluetooth for whatever reason. And so if somebody with a taser, which is likely a law enforcement officer, is around you, they will basically a few hundred meters around them just broadcast their presence because they have a taser device on them. That's another interesting thing you could think about, right? I would assume the same with body cameras, all of those things. So the more you get into that, the more like, huh, I never thought about that. It's really starting to come out, and that you need to collect that data to do something about it, basically. Yeah.
That's super cool. And so somebody asked the question, and as somebody who's about to get to go for his ham radio license exam, I'm kind of curious about it as well. So all that stuff that you mentioned uh, is okay from a regulation perspective, like with the FCC, because it's entirely passive, is my understanding, right?
So that is
Okay.
another absolutely fantastic question. I can tell you that on my when my accountants kind of sent me my quarterly summary, there is a pretty large position for legal. So I'm not. I want to be very clear that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving any legal advice. But it's not quite that easy. It depends, first of all, which jurisdiction you're in. I can tell you, without giving you legal advice, that in the United States, there are carve outs in laws for when you use that data for cybersecurity adjacent use cases, where because you will absolutely pick up information from other Wi-Fi's that are not yours, right? From other devices, from Bluetooth devices, all sorts of radio frequency things. You will pick those up, and then you will likely store them and you will look at them. If you have a reason to do that for your own cybersecurity, there are carve outs. So I got a pretty large analysis done on that to make sure this is all fine. And it mostly is. I am going to assume that this is an entirely different story in the European Union. I don't know right now, honestly. That is something that we'll have to figure out eventually as well. I know people do it there all the time. I also know that your phone, if you happen to be in the European Union right now or anywhere in the world, your phone is already doing that, right? It's building a list of networks that are available. Is that allowed? I mean, that's probably the intent of the emitting device, but it gets a little tricky. I can tell you that what you absolutely should not do under any circumstances, and that is what people ask for, and I tell them I'm not going to build that, is to basically fire back and start to jam devices that are doing something to your network, because that now goes deep into all sorts of jamming laws, and especially the FCC in the United States does not mess around with that. I couldn't stop you if you used a webhook to do that, but that is something that I'll be very careful with. And they do actually, if you do this too much, you might actually get in trouble for that. Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, it's my understanding. It's not a joke. That's right.
yeah.
Cool. I think you kind of touched on like, hey, this type of device slash software slash equipment, opens up all kinds of interesting other scenarios. Uh, is there sorry, just got a weird pop up. Um, is there a is there a new type of scenario that has opened up that you're thinking you might actually kind of like go deeper into it? Like the kind of potentially obvious one that comes to mind is like drones. It feels like nowadays there's more and more interesting drone stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, yes, absolutely. I think the whole world is talking about drones, right? I think we've seen a giant transformation since the start of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, of the use of drones. There is, of course, I think there is a big difference if you're protecting against a drone that has an artillery shell on it and is flying your direction. That you will probably want a different level of protection, right? But there are use cases, I think, for these things that are listed earlier. I can tell you that the place in Mississippi where oil pipelines come ashore does never want to have a drone, no matter what. Not a little DJI because the sunset is so beautiful. They'll do something about that, right? I think schools are like that. All sorts of law enforcement, all sorts of military. They don't want any drone around there. And then airports, obviously. There are different levels of how much protection you need against that, and the more protection you need, and the more detection you need of it, you will pay more and more money to get that done because eventually you need a radar, basically. That gets really, really expensive. There is this common ground, not a common ground. There's this ground in the middle where you just need to know if that drone that is around is something malicious or not. And so I've heard from people who actually here in Houston who are responsible for the physical security of these oil and gas environments, and they said that they have a problem that there's people that there is a drone close to them, and they need to send their physical security team to figure this out. But if they could pick up the self-identification of the drone, which they're now sending by law, if they could pick that up, which is fairly easy to pick up, they would see that, oh, that's just a realtor who is taking pictures of the land that's next door to us that he tries to sell, or that's just a little DJI drone and the operator's on the beach and like, yeah, let him film their sunset. That's fine. Then just kind of getting these almost false positives out of the way, you can do pretty cheaply because these drone self-identification is actually sent over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So I'm already picking these up. So I can already plot a drone on a map. And the use case for that, I'm very clear about that. It's not, hey, I'm going to protect you against any drone, and you can use this fairly cheap hardware to be safe against any drone that might be in the environment. It is the use case is very clearly, this will tell you if it's the realtor, and you don't, it's fine. Just you can let them do it. Don't send your team there. It's okay. They're also allowed to do that. And so that was an interesting use case where my first reaction was like, yeah, but I'm going to miss like the really bad ones where somebody turns off the self-identification, right? But really the reduction of the workload is what it's about, which is if we see a drone, somebody saw it, and we don't see it in the software, that's odd. Now we definitely need to send someone. That was one of these things that I hadn't thought about before. And then a lot of use cases for TSCM, so technical surveillance countermeasures, where you want to know if there's a new device that's transmitting on a frequency that hasn't transmitted before, on very low protocol level, maybe just the fact that there is emission on the frequency that you haven't seen before. Then you go hunt and try to find out what it is. But that needs to happen continuously, and you can't do that once a quarter with a bug sweep, for example. That's classic surveillance. That's someone put a wireless microphone somewhere in a drop ceiling or something, which is also something I didn't have in mind for sure. But you can keep on going with these things because there's so much stuff you can do maliciously. I won't run out of use cases. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
I bet. I bet. Is there any future use case that you would like to go towards, or you're thinking of doing, or looking for help doing? I have no idea. I guess there's an open source component, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's entirely open source. There's nothing closed source in this. Everything's open source on GitHub. I think it's the SDR part. Right now, everything is very specifically built for the protocol or the carrier that it's looking at. So it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, then certain industrial IoT protocols, these things. If you want to get real flexibility in this, it gets a little more expensive, but if you want to use a software-defined radio and say, I need basically a constant sweep of the entire radio frequency spectrum. And I need to know if there's something new transmitting on 395 megahertz. I don't even know what it is, but it wasn't there yesterday. So now I want to know what it is. That's a really interesting thing to do. That is definitely something for the future that I'm pretty excited about. And then I think everything that comes to physically locating things that could need some improvement can do a lot of that already, but getting more, being able to pinpoint more where a signal source actually is. That's a pretty cool thing to do. That's a little rough right now, I would say. Um, and then I had one more thing. Oh yeah, for drone detection, I actually I have to keep myself from not starting to do that just because it's fun. Using microphones for that, because you will, if they get close to you, you will eventually pick up the actual sound emission, the audio of the actual motors that are spinning, and they're spinning on a pretty regular frequency. So using maybe multiple sensors that are really just microphones that are pointed up in the sky, and then using that, because now I don't care that now it could even be one of those new fiber optic drones. You just literally pick up the sound of their motors, and that's going to be something that's going to be very hard to silence. But again, I'm talking about it now. I want to build it again, so that maybe in the future, I don't know, could be a Christmas project to play around.
It feels like it's kind of like passing that threshold between, hey, drones is a sub use case of this thing, into now I'm building things that purposeful, just built for drones, right? Which sounds
Right.
super cool, but it's yeah, it sounds like a rabbit hole for sure. Is there anything that you haven't been able to do that you really wish that you could do, or that is just fundamentally not possible to do? I'm curious.
Um, I think I had really struggled with against the drones. And I hope all of this pays off and people actually use the drone stuff because a lot of work went into that, and I hadn't planned that initially. I was playing around with a more universal detection of drones based on their radio frequency emissions. That's just something I stopped because it just felt like it wasn't worth the effort yet, because you end up having to reverse engineer the DJI codecs and stuff, because they're all operating in the license-free band, and that band gets really cramped. So you can't just say, "Oh, there's something," because there's always going to be something in that band. You can't say just because there's an emission on that frequency that there's now a drone. You have to actually decode it, and so now it's very complex. There is a reason that if you want to do that, you spend millions of dollars for the detection. That would be cool, but it's just not feasible for me to do right now. I think that's also why I ended up with the microphones as the next thing to look at.
It also sounds super data intensive, of like, I have now to run these hundreds of different brands and go through crunching all the things. That's brutal.
And the idea is to keep it affordable, because I don't want to end up with another $1 million solution. The idea is to actually letting more people who might be at risk of these things be able to run this. And that's not going to work if you end up where all the others are, which is, well, we start at $1 million just for the license, and then each sensor costs another 100,000. That's specifically what I don't want to do. So that's, I think, part of this whole idea, that not everybody needs this, but there's this gray area of, I think you should have this, but I also understand that it's not worth $1 million for you. So that's where you got to be careful and not accidentally starting to build the same that others have already built. That's just unaffordable for non-governmental agencies, basically.
That's really good. I That's a very it's a very good philosophy. I like that a lot. Um, Thank you so much for coming in. That was like somebody put in the chat. I mean, this feels like, we could easily spend multiple hours just chatting about like all of the things in there. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, is there a better way to do that?
It's actually, I mean, the world has changed. It is actually LinkedIn now for me. I have made LinkedIn mostly enjoyable. I've left Twitter a while ago and was not happy with all the other things that are out there. So I'm actually on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. Just kind of reach out. I love to talk. We have a Discord that you can go into. It's pretty busy. I'm in there all the time. Just kind of go to the Nzyme website and check out kind of the community contact sources there, and then It's me and all the others just hanging out there and just talk about stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for coming in for the chat. We will see you next week for next Defender Fridays. All right,
That's
see you.
great. Thanks, everyone.